Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whatever time it is that you hear this message, I pray that your mind is open to receive, to accept, and to respond to words of wisdom. Ashe. So I just got a really quick little lesson that I want to drop into the bucket of knowledge right now. Um, because here in the United States, the overwhelming majority of the people are new to the tradition, right? And so I love that. Right? I love the newness. I love the beginner's mind, because you see things differently when you're a beginner. But here's something that I know about being a beginner. When you're a beginner, you tend to adopt or absorb the attitudes, the perceptions, you know, the thought processes of your predecessors or of your teachers, right? And what that means is for most African American practitioners is that even if you come into something that you consider the Yoruba, the Isheshe tradition, chances are your predecessors have and project some variation of the Afro-Cuban tradition. And if your predecessors don't, when you look out into the general public and let's say you do an internet search on Orisha, the chances are super duper high, like over 90%, that the information that you're getting is actually Afro-Cuban, Lukumi, let's just say it's Lukumi content being presented as universal, right? So a person may say that, hey, this is about Oshun. But when they start to describe Oshun, they'll be saying that she's a seductress, and they'll say that she loves honey, and they'll say that she's, she's got a mirror and a fan, and she's always laughing and blah, blah, blah. And they'll present that as that is Oshun. But that's the Lukumi version of Oshun. That isn't necessarily what you're going to find when you go to West Africa, right? And if you do find those attributes, whereas they're going to be really highly prioritized in the Afro-Cuban tradition, in the Lukumi tradition, they're going to have a really minuscule, significance in Yoruba land. Just to give you an example, right? So chances are the information that you're coming in contact with is primarily Lukumi derived, right? Which is one thing. But on top of that, what you got to understand is that what you consider Lukumi is really Miami, is really New York, right? What they're teaching on the ground and the perceptions and the attitudes and the biases, etc., that they've got in Cuba are not necessarily congruent with or identical to what they're saying in Miami, what they're writing in blogs and what they're putting in books, etc. It's not necessarily consistent. Okay. Now this is crucial because right now, and this is why I'm saying this, it's in response to something that I keep seeing in the last couple of weeks. There's a recurring message that crops up from a certain Lukumi academician, leader, elder, who shall go unnamed because I don't want to make it seem like it's a personal thing against this person or that person. I'm really speaking more to a mindset. But this mindset continues to assert that, hey, I am standing up for Lukumi identity. And the way that I am going to affirm Lukumi identity is by constantly disassociating Lukumi identity from Yoruba identity, distancing ourselves from the West African roots, We are not. This is the whole platform. We are not Yoruba, right? And that's problematic. It's a big giant red flag for me. Big giant red flag. Not because I practice the Afro-Cuban tradition. I don't. I don't have any Lukumi anything. I don't. You know what I mean? I don't practice it. I haven't practiced it. It isn't something that I'm invested in one way or the other. But here is my concern. Here's my concern. My concern is that, as I said, as a beginner, you're going to adopt the attitudes and the perceptions and the approaches and the biases of your predecessors. And before you know that, you know, their persuasion has influenced your interpretation of things, it's sort of baked in, and now you got to go through the process of unlearning a lot of different things. And it's difficult to unlearn an attitude. So for African Americans who are coming into the tradition and you're being exposed to Lukumi propaganda, I honestly just don't want any African Americans to adopt any of that anti-African sentiment at all. It has no place in your practice. It has no place in your practice. This idea that even if you practice the Lukumi tradition, the idea that your identity as a Lukumi practitioner is separate from or defined as being not African, no, absolutely not. Because number one, every Lukumi lineage, every Lukumi lineage is distinguished by, is legitimized by, is validated by what? By its ability to trace its roots and its origins back to somebody who came from Africa. Every Lukumi lineage. Go ask, how do we know that we're a legit lineage? Oh, because so-and-so and so-and-so was from Yoruba land. So number one, all of your legitimacy is based on the fact that somebody came from Africa, right? Number two, this is anecdotal. I've only been to Cuba one time. But I'm going to tell you, the time that I was in Cuba, I was there for about a month. Without exaggeration, every day, someone would stop me in the street. Every day, somebody would stop me. They would see my beads. They would see my African attire. Oh, you're a Babalawo, but you practice the Nigerian way. Yes. And then they go into the routine. There's a whole format. Dani Odu, what's your Odu? Oh, I tell them my Odu. They tell me what they know about my Odu. If they know something, if they are Babalawo, that's customary. And then they would tell me their Odu, and then I would tell them what I know about their Ifa. And these people were 100% open. They were 100% open, 100% receptive. You say, oh, yes, Iboru, that's true, that happened. My brother, blah, 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 blah. You know, I mean, the attitude was completely open. Hey, we're brothers. We're brothers. Okay, and that has been my experience with Afro-Cubans since the beginning. Since I was introduced to this tradition, I've been met and received with open arms and, you know, a brotherly embrace. So this idea that somehow we're going to define ourselves as not Africans doesn't match up with the historical experience of the Cuban tradition that I know about it, and B, it doesn't match up with the contemporary attitudes and realities of actual Lukumi people in Cuba. Okay, and so you as an African American do not accept this idea that you're going to define your practice as not African, right? The Yoruba say, no matter how far a river flows, it never forgets its source. No matter how far a river flows, it never forgets its source. The river can flow all through Cuba and elsewhere, but it does not, it cannot separate itself from its source. Otherwise, it will dry up and it will die. Okay? So that is the first thing that I want to say about the subject. The second thing that I want to say about the subject, the reason why this matters, and the reason why this is very, you got to be very astute, is that in Cuba, they have a very particular political history, right, with communism and socialism, and the reason why there are Yoruba, there are Cubans in Miami and all that. You have to go and do research on that if you don't know about the relationship between Cuba and Russia and the United States. But they've got their own political experience, you know, and so because of that, they approach things in a certain way, right? Again, this idea that the attitudes and the perceptions of your predecessors infiltrates your thinking and the way you approach things. The Cubans approach things in a certain way because of their political history, and they're doing everything, right? The Cubans, people of Cuban descent in Miami and elsewhere, they're doing everything with this political history in the backdrop. So their identity politics is always somehow tied to Castro and the anti-Castro something, and you know what I mean, they're doing something totally different that's got nothing, again, nothing to do with you as an African American. Don't accept any of that. Don't accept any of that. Don't give them, that is not your concern. You are concerned with Detroit, with South Side of Chicago, with Houston. You're concerned with New Orleans. You're concerned with LA and Oakland and Atlanta, and you know what I mean. These are your concerns. These are the things that you need to be worried about, not their political whatever they got going on, right? And so your ability to align yourself with other Africans around the world and understand how they're solving their problems in Colón, Panama, how they're solving their problems in Salvador da Bahia, how they're solving their problems in Rio de Janeiro, how they're solving their problems in Leeds, you know, England, and how they're solving their problems in Lagos. Those are the things that we need to be aware of. What are our people facing day to day? What are the problems and the opportunities that we're facing day to day? Those other people's problems and how they approach it and what their history is, that's great for them, but that doesn't dictate my identity as a black man in the world today. We have a common history, we have a shared experience, we have a common enemy, we have a shared destiny. And if you practice the Afro-Cuban tradition or the Candomblé tradition or Haitian Vodun or Isheshe or anything in between, if you practice on the Akan side or the Congo side, whatever it is that you do, hey, we're trying to venerate and empower our ancestors so that we can get free, so that we can uplift ourselves and one another. That's our goal. So anything that seeks to separate you, especially in the name of African tradition, somebody's going to try to use African tradition to say that this group of Africans is not African or this African practice is not African. Forget that. No, absolutely not. Reject that. Reject that. We are brothers and sisters with a common struggle. One aim, one culture, one destiny. That's it. That's it. Everything else, reject. Okay? So that's the lesson that I want to share with the good people today. And I hope it's well received and well understood. Well understood. Don't be a useful idiot for somebody else's agenda. Aboye, Aboshishe.